The night was thick with tension, the moon barely visible behind a veil of clouds, as Ifeoma sat alone in her darkened living room. Her hands trembled as they clutched a crumpled letter, the edges torn, the ink blurred with tears. It had been 6 long months since she last heard from Chidi, her husband, the man she had once called the love of her life, the man who had walked out on her, leaving nothing but heartbreak and pain in his wake. The letter in her hand was the one thing that could change everything. She tore it open with trembling fingers, her heart pounding in her chest as she read the words that would forever alter her reality. "I'm sorry, Ifeoma. I couldn't do it anymore. I know you'll be fine without me. I found someone else, someone who understands my ambitions. You're too tied to your small business, and I can't be with someone who doesn't see the bigger picture. I wish you the best, truly. Chidi." Her mind went blank as she reread the words. Chidi, her husband, the man she thought would always be by her side, had left her for another woman. But it wasn't the woman that stung the most. It was the realization that he had left her without knowing the truth that would have shattered him completely. If he had known what she was sitting on, would he have left her? Would he have thrown it all away? Ifeoma slowly placed the letter down and pulled out another piece of paper from the drawer of her coffee table. It was an offer letter, a deal, a partnership worth over $1 billion. But it wasn't just any partnership. It was for the oil company that she had secretly built from the ground up. You see, Ifeoma was no ordinary woman. She wasn't just the girl Chidi had married when she was working her little shop on the corner of their street. No, she was a force to be reckoned with, a businesswoman whose rise from the ashes of poverty had been swift, calculated, and, for the most part, secret. The world thought Ifeoma was just another quiet woman, supporting her husband's dreams while keeping a small, modest business afloat. What they didn't know was that her business was not just small. It was a multi-billion-dollar oil company that she had built from the ground up, alone. Chidi had no idea. But now, the time had come for her to make the choice that would define her future. Would she confront him with the truth, showing him the empire she had built in silence? Or would she continue to keep the secret, allowing him to live in blissful ignorance as he enjoyed the life she had made possible for him? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door, a sound that felt like thunder in the otherwise still night. "Who could that be?" she whispered to herself, wondering if it was Chidi, back from wherever he had run to, pretending like nothing had happened. She opened the door to find a man standing on her doorstep, tall, dressed in a crisp suit, with a look of purpose in his eyes. "Are you Ifeoma Okafor?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "Yes, that's me. What do you want?" Her heart skipped a beat. The man stepped forward. "I'm here on behalf of the consortium interested in your oil business," he said. "We've been monitoring your operations closely. We would like to discuss a significant deal with you." Ifeoma's mind raced. She had known this day would come, when her secret would be uncovered, but she hadn't expected it to happen so soon. Her thoughts were torn between this unexpected visitor and the pain of the letter that still lay on the coffee table. But there was something else in his eyes, something she couldn't quite place. Was he offering her a deal, or was he here for another reason? "I didn't realize anyone knew about my business," Ifeoma said, trying to keep her voice steady. The man smiled slightly, as though her response amused him. "We've known for a while now, Ms. Okafor. You've been quite clever in keeping it under wraps. But it's time to come to the table. Your empire is far too valuable to remain hidden." As he spoke, the reality of the situation started to sink in. This was no ordinary offer. The man was speaking to her as though she were a titan in the business world, something Chidi had never understood, never believed. Her heart pounded as she thought about how her husband had left her, unaware of the wealth and power she now commanded. What would happen if she told him the truth now? Would he return? Or would it only confirm that he had left her for someone who understood his so-called ambitions? Before she could speak again, the man handed her a sealed envelope. "Please read this. It's an official proposal. We've taken the liberty to move things forward on your behalf." As he turned to leave, Ifeoma stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. "I'll leave you to think it over," he said, with a hint of something ominous in his voice. "But don't take too long. The offer is only valid for a limited time." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Ifeoma alone again in the dark silence. As she looked down at the envelope in her hands, the storm inside her heart raged. How had she gotten here? A multi-billion-dollar oil company. And yet, the one person she had trusted most in this world, Chidi, had left her in pain and disbelief. Would she reveal the truth to him? Or would she let him continue his life, unaware of the empire she had quietly built? Her hands shook as she opened the envelope, the weight of her decision settling over her. But as she pulled out the contents, something else fell out, something that made her blood run cold. A photograph. It was a picture of Chidi, laughing and holding hands with another woman. "Chidi?" she whispered in disbelief, her heart sinking. To be continued. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more twists and turns in Ifeoma's story. What do you think about the mystery man's sudden arrival? Do you think Chidi is aware of Ifeoma's business? Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. The room felt colder than it should have, the faint hum of the city outside barely breaking the silence. Ifeoma sat at the small kitchen table, the photograph of Chidi in her hands, as though it might reveal some hidden truth she couldn't yet comprehend. The man in the photo was smiling, his arm wrapped around a woman with a radiant face, someone completely unfamiliar to her. They looked happy, and that happiness seemed like a cruel mockery of everything Ifeoma had ever known. Her eyes flickered between the photo and the envelope, her mind a storm of confusion and anger. She had trusted Chidi. He had been her partner, her confidant, the man who promised to build a life with her. And yet, this photograph, this cold reminder, showed that he had moved on with someone else, while she was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered life. Ifeoma slammed the photograph down on the table, the loud thud echoing through the room. Her hands clenched into fists as she tried to push the emotions rising within her back down. The quiet tap of her phone vibrating on the table interrupted her thoughts. She picked it up, still fuming, and saw the message that made her stomach turn. It was from a number she didn't recognize. "I hope you know the truth. Chidi's not the man you think he is." She stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. How did this person know about Chidi? Why send her such an ominous text now, when everything was already falling apart? The phone vibrated again, and another message followed. "He's been playing both sides. The woman in the picture, that's his new partner, and she's been around for a while. But don't worry, Ifeoma. I'm not here to make you feel worse. I'm here to help you take control of your life." Ifeoma's breath caught in her throat. There was something off about this message, something that felt both reassuring and threatening. Who was this person? And why were they reaching out now? Her mind raced, but the calm voice of reason told her to put the phone down. Maybe it was some prank. Maybe someone was just trying to twist the knife further, after everything Chidi had already done. But then again, what if this was real? What if this was the breakthrough she needed to truly understand what had happened? She pressed her lips together, trying to regain her composure. The truth was, she didn't trust anyone anymore, not even herself. She had spent years keeping a secret so deep and buried that even the people closest to her didn't know about it. Not Chidi, not her friends, and certainly not anyone from her past. The deal that the man in the suit had brought her, the oil partnership worth billions, had always been just that, a business deal. It wasn't meant to be shared with anyone. She had built her empire on her own, in the shadows. The world would never understand how far she'd come or how hard it had been. She couldn't allow anyone to see it. Certainly not Chidi, who had always doubted her from the start. But as the hours passed, Ifeoma realized something else. This wasn't just about her business anymore. This was about power. Her power. And somehow, despite the betrayal she felt from Chidi, the strength she had been hiding for so long had started to grow deep inside her. Ifeoma stared at the photograph of her husband and the other woman again. They looked so happy, so carefree, as though her entire existence hadn't meant a thing. How could he leave her without a second thought? How could he throw away everything they had built for someone else? Her hand clenched around the photograph once more, her fingers turning white. Then, she took a deep breath and made a decision. She wasn't going to stay silent anymore. She would take control of this situation. If Chidi thought he could walk away from her without understanding who she truly was, then he had another thing coming. The time had come for Ifeoma to reveal herself, not just as the woman he had once known, but as a force of nature he had no idea was lurking beneath the surface. The next day, Ifeoma called the number from the text message. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of curiosity in her tone. "Who is this?" she asked. The voice on the other end of the line was smooth, almost like velvet. "I think you know who I am, Ifeoma. I've been keeping an eye on things for a while. There's much more at play here than you realize. And trust me, Chidi has no idea what he's messing with." Ifeoma's heart raced. "What do you want from me?" "Not much. I just want you to understand that you have the power to turn everything around. All you need is the right guidance." "Guidance?" Ifeoma's voice hardened. "You're talking in riddles. Who are you?" "I'm someone who knows what it's like to be overlooked. I see your potential. You don't need to keep hiding anymore. You don't need him. You never did." Ifeoma's grip on the phone tightened. This person seemed to know too much. They had been watching her, possibly even longer than she had realized. But why? Before she could speak, the voice added, "Just remember, Ifeoma, the truth is always there, waiting, and it can be a powerful ally or a deadly enemy." The line went dead. She stared at the phone, her mind racing. Who was that? What were they talking about? But one thing was certain. Whoever they weren't the only ones watching her. Chidi had his secrets, but so did she. And now, it seemed like the time had come for all the hidden truths to surface. Ifeoma walked over to the window, gazing out at the city below, the lights twinkling like stars in the distance. The weight of the decision she had made felt heavy, but she knew it was the only way forward. There was no going back now. Chidi would learn the truth soon enough, and when he did, everything would change. Ifeoma couldn't sleep. The hours passed slowly, like the ticking of a clock that marked time she could never get back. The phone call earlier that night had stirred something in her, something deep and unresolved. The voice on the other end had promised her power, but there was also a warning beneath it, a warning that felt almost like a challenge. Whoever this person was, they clearly knew more about her life than she was comfortable with. They had made it clear that they were watching, keeping track of her every move. Was this a threat? Or was this some strange opportunity that had somehow found its way into her life? She couldn't ignore the chill that crept down her spine, and she couldn't stop the questions swirling in her mind. Was Chidi involved in all of this? Had he known about the oil business all along? Or was he just another pawn in a much larger game that she had only begun to understand? The more she thought about it, the more the layers of her life seemed to unravel. For so long, she had kept everything under control. Her business, her secrets, her marriage. But now, everything felt like it was slipping through her fingers. It had been a year since Chidi had left her, and even though she hadn't heard from him in all that time, his presence still haunted her. His absence had forced her to grow stronger, more resilient, but she had done so silently under the radar. No one had ever known the truth about her success, not even Chidi. Now, the question loomed over her like a dark cloud. What was he going to do when he found out? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was sharp, insistent, pulling her from her daze. Ifeoma froze. Who could it be at this hour? Slowly, she stood up from the couch, her bare feet brushing against the cold wooden floor. Her heart raced as she walked toward the door. There was no one else who should be coming over. Not now. Not tonight. Peering through the peephole, her breath caught in her throat. It was him. Chidi stood on the other side, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the street lamps. She could hardly believe her eyes. After all this time, after everything that had happened, he was standing at her door. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest as she felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Anger, confusion, disbelief. and an unexpected ache deep in her stomach. She opened the door slowly, her voice tight with control. "What are you doing here?" Chidi looked different. Older, more worn, his clothes more expensive than she remembered. But there was something tired in his eyes. He wasn't the same man who had left her. That much was clear. But she couldn't place it. He seemed almost out of place, like a shadow of the man he once was. "I need to talk to you, Ifeoma," he said, his voice low and hesitant, like he wasn't sure how to begin. "Please, just hear me out." Ifeoma stood in the doorway, crossing her arms, trying to mask the flurry of emotions inside her. "Talk? After you left me with nothing but heartbreak? After all the lies?" Her voice shook with the force of the words she hadn't said in so long. Chidi looked down, his hands shoved into his pockets, his face scrunched in frustration. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Ifeoma. I was wrong. I was an idiot. I've been a fool." The words sounded rehearsed, like something he had practiced, trying to convince himself of the sincerity of his apology. But Ifeoma wasn't buying it. "Fool?" she repeated, scoffing. "You think that's enough to explain why you left me? You think sorry is going to fix everything?" He stepped closer, but she held her ground, unwilling to let him get any closer. "I know you're angry," he said. "I understand. I deserve it. But please, just let me explain." Ifeoma's eyes narrowed. She had heard it all before. The promises, the apologies. They all felt the same. Hollow. Empty. "You're wasting your time, Chidi. You should have thought about that before you walked away." For a long moment, he was silent, his eyes scanning her face like he was searching for something. Then, finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter, almost pleading. "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't know what you were hiding. I didn't know about the business. If I had known, maybe things would have been different. Maybe I wouldn't have made the mistakes I did." Ifeoma's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about?" Her voice was suddenly sharp with suspicion. "You didn't know? You didn't know about my business?" Chidi shook his head, his expression serious. I didn't know about the oil, Ifeoma. All I saw was a woman who was too focused on, I don't know, the little things. I thought it was just some small business you were running. I thought you didn't care about the bigger picture. But now everything's changed. Everything I thought I knew about you has turned upside down." Ifeoma felt the sting of his words, the realization hitting her like a punch to the gut. She had worked so hard to keep the business hidden from him, to protect it from people like him, from anyone who might not understand. But now it seemed that the truth was coming out in the most unexpected way. "You never cared about what I was doing, did you, Chidi?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of pain and anger. "You never bothered to ask what I was working on, what I was building. You were too busy chasing after your own dreams to even notice what was right in front of you." He flinched, but there was no denying the truth in her words. "I was selfish. I admit it. I should have seen it, I should have known. I can't take back the mistakes I made, Ifeoma. But I want to make it right. I want us to, I don't know, rebuild. Start over." Ifeoma took a step back, her mind reeling. The man standing in front of her wasn't the same one who had left her. But did that mean he deserved a second chance? Did he deserve to know everything now? She looked at him, her eyes searching for any trace of the man she had loved. But all she saw was a man who had lost his way. "I can't just forget what you did, Chidi," she said, her voice steady now, her resolve returning. "You left me when I needed you most, and you did it without knowing who I really was." Chidi's face fell, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I know, and I'm sorry, but Ifeoma, The phone on the table rang, cutting him off mid-sentence. Ifeoma's heart skipped a beat as she glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number, the same one that had sent her the cryptic text messages. Without thinking, she picked up the phone, her voice suddenly cold. "Hello, did you tell him yet?" The voice was unmistakable, the same smooth, dangerous tone she had heard the night before. Ifeoma's stomach dropped. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, her grip tightening on the phone. The voice on the other end chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. "We'll talk soon, Ifeoma, but don't keep him in the dark for too long. It wouldn't be good for you." The line went dead. Ifeoma slowly lowered the phone, her mind racing. Chidi was still standing in front of her, looking confused, waiting for her to respond. But all she could think about was the voice on the phone, the chilling words that had just been spoken. She wasn't in control of this anymore. Ifeoma couldn't shake the feeling that the ground beneath her was shifting, that she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to be pulled into something far deeper than she had ever expected. The phone call had rattled her, and as she stared at Chidi, standing in her doorway with that look of longing in his eyes, everything she had been trying to avoid seemed to be crashing into her all at once. Chidi, ever the manipulator, wasn't giving up easily. He took a step forward, closing the gap between them as though trying to bridge the distance he had created when he left her. But Ifeoma wasn't ready to be swept up in his words again. She wasn't the same woman he had walked away from. She had built something for herself, a life, a business, a future, and Chidi had no idea what it cost her. "I know I messed up, Ifeoma," Chidi continued, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "I didn't see it. I didn't see what you were building, and that's my biggest regret." Ifeoma met his gaze, her jaw tight, trying to stay focused on the situation. His words were familiar, too familiar. She had heard them all before. He was sorry he had messed up, and yet, none of that could undo the years she had spent supporting him, while he dismissed her dreams. None of that could undo the betrayal she felt now, knowing how little he had cared to understand her. "Chidi," she began, her voice steady, though the anger inside her burned hot. "You didn't see it because you didn't want to. You never bothered to ask, never bothered to look beyond your own ambitions. I spent years building something you couldn't see, and now you're here asking for a second chance." She took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm within. "No, Chidi, it's not that simple. You can't just waltz back into my life because you finally realize what I've accomplished. You left me when I needed you most, and now you're asking for forgiveness." Chidi opened his mouth to respond, but she held up her hand to stop him. "Before you say anything," she said, her voice sharp, "there's something you need to understand. I don't need you. Not anymore." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. Ifeoma could see the hurt flash across Chidi's face, but she didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that her emotions couldn't be manipulated by guilt or sentimentality. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Chidi spoke again, his voice softer, more measured this time. "I know what you're doing," he said quietly. "You're trying to protect yourself, trying to keep your distance. But I'm not here to hurt you. I want to be a part of your life again. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." Ifeoma's heart pounded, but not in the way it used to. There was no fluttering excitement, no joy at hearing Chidi's voice after so long. Instead, there was just the cold realization that nothing he said could change what had happened. He couldn't just walk back in after abandoning her for months, leaving her to pick up the pieces of a life they had both shared. She was done being the woman who lived in the shadows of his ambitions. She was done pretending that their shared history meant anything if it didn't include respect. "I'm not the woman you left behind," Ifeoma said, her voice steady. "I've changed. I've built something you could never see. And I'm not going to let you back into my life just because you finally see me. It's too late for that." Chidi flinched at her words, but he didn't back down. He stepped closer again, this time with more urgency in his eyes. "I'm not asking for everything back, Ifeoma. I don't expect us to pick up where we left off. But we can start again. We can rebuild together. Please, let me prove it to you." Ifeoma took a step back, shaking her head. She didn't want to hear it. It was like a broken record, spinning the same tired tale of regret and promises. She had heard it all before, and she had learned from that pain. But just as she was about to close the door, her phone rang again. The same unknown number. Her heart skipped, the chill creeping down her spine once more. She glanced at Chidi, who was watching her with confusion written on his face. The phone's incessant ringing was a sharp contrast to the tension in the room. She answered it without thinking. "Yes?" she said, her voice strained. "Did you tell him yet?" The same voice from before. Smooth, cold, almost mocking. Ifeoma's breath hitched. "What do you want from me?" she asked again, her patience wearing thin. The voice on the other end laughed softly, but it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was the kind of laugh you heard when someone knew something you didn't. "You really think this is just about Chidi, don't you, Ifeoma? You think this is just about him coming back and begging for forgiveness? You couldn't be more wrong. You're in way deeper than you realize, and you don't even know who you're dealing with." Ifeoma felt her heart drop into her stomach. The voice was speaking with such authority, like they knew every part of her life. "Who are you?" she demanded. The voice didn't answer directly. Instead, it said, "You're not the only one who's been building an empire, Ifeoma. And the man standing in front of you, he's not who you think he is either. You're playing a dangerous game, and it's about time you realized that." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Her hand shook as she lowered the phone, her mind spinning with questions she had no answers to. Chidi was still standing there, his expression a mix of concern and confusion. He had heard part of the conversation, and now he was looking at her like she was a stranger. "Ifeoma, what's going on?" he asked softly, taking another step closer. "Who was that?" Ifeoma felt the weight of the moment crash down on her. The secret she had kept for so long, the lies she had told, the empire she had built in silence. It was all unraveling before her eyes. Chidi was still standing there, but his place in her life was no longer secure. And now, with the call from the unknown voice, Ifeoma realized that her world was about to change in ways she couldn't predict. "Chidi, you need to leave," she said, her voice firm. "You're not part of this anymore. Not the way you think you are." His face twisted in disbelief, but he didn't argue. He turned slowly, walking out the door without another word, leaving Ifeoma standing in the dim light of her apartment, alone once again. But this time, she wasn't just grieving the loss of a man. She was preparing for something much bigger, something that would test her strength, her resolve, and her ability to hold on to everything she had worked for. Ifeoma didn't know who was pulling the strings behind the scenes, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let them control her. Not again. Ifeoma stood in the doorway, watching Chidi's silhouette disappear into the dark night. The door clicked shut with a hollow sound, and for a moment, she was left in complete silence, the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on her like a heavy blanket. Her thoughts raced. She had never wanted this, never wanted her life to become a battleground between her past and her future. But somehow, it seemed that was exactly what was happening. Chidi's return had stirred up a storm she hadn't been prepared for. She had built her life on the belief that she could keep the world at arm's length, that she could keep her success hidden and protected. But now everything was changing. And then there were the cryptic phone calls. Who was that person on the other end of the line? Why were they involved in her life? And what did they mean when they said that Chidi wasn't who she thought he was? She couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was lurking just beneath the surface. Something she didn't understand yet, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face it. Her phone buzzed again, and for a moment, she froze. Was it Chidi? No, it was the unknown number again. She hesitated, staring at the screen, feeling that familiar chill in her bones. She pressed answer without thinking, her heart hammering in her chest. "I told you we would talk soon, Ifeoma," the voice on the other end said, smooth and almost mocking. Her throat tightened. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, her voice cracking despite her best effort to stay calm. "You've been watching me. Who are you?" There was a pause on the other end, and when the voice spoke again, it was even colder than before. "You think you're the only one with secrets, Ifeoma?" the voice asked. "You think you've built something no one can touch? You're not as untouchable as you think." Ifeoma's mind spun. "What are you talking about? You've been playing a dangerous game, but you're not the only player," the voice said, its tone growing colder still. "There are people who want what you have, people who are willing to do whatever it takes to take it from you. The blood drained from Ifeoma's face as the words sank in. There were people after her business, after her empire. Her gut twisted, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly vulnerable. "Who are you?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. The voice chuckled darkly. "Does it matter, Ifeoma? The real question is, do you think you can keep hiding from the truth?" Ifeoma gripped the phone tightly, her knuckles white. "I'm not afraid of you," she spat, trying to sound stronger than she felt. "If you think you can scare me into handing over my business, you're wrong." The voice's laughter echoed through the line, low and sinister. "We'll see about that, won't we? The game has already begun. And now you have no choice but to play." With that, the call abruptly ended. Ifeoma stood still, the phone pressed to her ear, listening to the dial tone in stunned silence. Her mind raced, her body trembling with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had thought she was in control of her own life, her business, her future. But now, she realized she had been living in a bubble, one that was about to burst. The sound of her front door creaking open brought her out of her daze, and she turned quickly, her breath catching in her throat. It was the man in the suit, the one who had come to her the day before with the proposal. He was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the room. His presence seemed almost predatory, like he was sizing her up. "What do you want?" Ifeoma demanded, her voice sharper than before. "I thought I made it clear that I wasn't interested." He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was cold, calculated, as though he was used to getting what he wanted, no matter the cost. "I think we both know you're interested," he said, his voice smooth like silk. "I'm not here to force you into anything. But you and I both know that your little business is worth far more than you realize. You've been playing with fire, Ifeoma. And the people I work with, they don't play fair." Ifeoma took a step back, her mind racing. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly despite herself. "Why are you here? What do you want from me?" He crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe, his posture casual, but there was something menacing about him. "I'm here to help you. Or rather, to give you a choice. You can accept the deal we've put on the table, or you can keep doing things your way. But I can promise you this. If you refuse, the consequences won't be as easy to manage." She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. This was not the time to show weakness, not with so much at stake. Her business, her future, everything she had worked for was on the line. "I don't need your help," she said firmly, though her heart was racing. "I built my empire without your help, and I'll continue to do so." He raised an eyebrow, as if amused by her defiance. "You think you can keep this secret from everyone forever, Ifeoma? The world doesn't work that way. You've attracted attention, and not the kind you want." Ifeoma's mind whirled. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about power, people wanting to take everything from her, to control her. She wasn't just dealing with businessmen now. She was dealing with players who had the resources to destroy everything she had built, and she didn't even know how deep it went. The man took a step forward, his tone darkening. "The question is, Ifeoma, what are you willing to do to protect what's yours? Because I can tell you right now, it's not going to be easy." "I'm not afraid of you," Ifeoma repeated, though she couldn't deny the fear creeping up her spine. "Oh, I'm sure you're not," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But soon you'll see just how much you have to lose." Before she could respond, he turned and walked out of the room, disappearing into the night without another word. Ifeoma stood there for a long moment, her thoughts spinning. The weight of the situation was beginning to settle in. She was being dragged into a world she didn't fully understand, and it was a world where the rules didn't apply to people like her. She had built her life on her own terms, but now it seemed the world was coming for her, and she had no choice but to fight back. The question was, how far was she willing to go to protect everything she had worked for? Ifeoma couldn't sleep. Not after the meeting with the man in the suit. Not after the ominous phone call that seemed to echo in her ears, even in the silence of her apartment. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind replayed the chilling words from the voice on the other end of the line. You've attracted attention, and not the kind you want. The implications were staggering. Who had been watching her? Who had been keeping track of her rise from nothing to something? She had spent years building her empire quietly, hiding it from the world, and now it seemed that someone had noticed her success, and they weren't going to let her keep it. As the morning light filtered through the blinds, Ifeoma sat up in bed, her mind still racing. She could feel the weight of the choices ahead pressing down on her. The man in the suit had made it clear that her business was no longer something she could control on her own. The world she had once known, the world where she had been in charge, was slipping through her fingers. And the worst part was, she didn't know who to trust anymore. The phone on her nightstand buzzed, and her heart skipped a beat. Another message from the unknown number. You can't hide forever, Ifeoma. The people who want what you have are closing in. If you want to keep your business, you'll need to make a choice. Don't say I didn't warn you. Her stomach churned as she read the message. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about her business anymore. There was something bigger at play, something far more dangerous than she had initially realized. The warning in the message felt real, and it terrified her. She sat up, rubbing her temples as she tried to clear her mind. Was this just an elaborate threat, or was there some truth to it? She had built her empire from the ground up, but she had never imagined that someone might want to take it from her, that the price for her success might be her very freedom. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was a call. It was the same number. Hesitant but resolute, Ifeoma answered. Hello. It's time to make a decision, Ifeoma, the voice said, low and steady, as though they had been waiting for this moment. The people I work with don't wait forever, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of this. I told you, I'm not interested in your deal, Ifeoma replied, her voice tight with defiance. I built this business on my own. I don't need anyone's help to keep it. The voice let out a soft chuckle. You really don't get it, do you? It's not about help. It's about survival. You've put yourself in a position where refusing to cooperate will cost you everything. Think about that. I've thought about it, she shot back, and I'm not backing down. I won't be bullied into selling what's mine. You misunderstand, the voice said, the amusement gone from their tone. This isn't about selling. This is about taking what's yours and making sure it doesn't destroy you in the process. Ifeoma's breath caught. What are you talking about? Consider this a warning, Ifeoma. The game has already started. It's not too late to make the right choice. Before she could respond, the line went dead. Her hands were trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. What had just happened? What game were they talking about? The tension in the air felt suffocating, and for the first time in years, Ifeoma felt truly powerless. She had spent so long building her life, hiding in the shadows, and now, it felt like everything was crashing down around her. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The only person who might have some answers was the man in the suit. He had been too calm, too collected when he had spoken to her the night before. He had known things about her business, about the people who were now watching her. He had been involved in this somehow, and she needed to find out how. Determined to take control of the situation, Ifeoma decided to pay him a visit. She couldn't wait any longer. She couldn't let fear dictate her next move. She got dressed quickly, her mind still spinning with questions. Where was he? What did he want? And how far was she willing to go to protect everything she had worked for? She walked out of her apartment, her steps steady despite the storm of thoughts swirling inside her. As she made her way down the street, the world seemed quieter than usual, almost too still. It was as though everything around her was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Ifeoma's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone buzzing again. This time, it was a text from her old friend, Ngozi. Ifeoma, are you okay? I've been hearing some things about you. People are talking. Be careful. If you need to talk, I'm here. Ifeoma paused, her thumb hovering over the reply button. She had always trusted Ngozi, but she didn't want to drag anyone else into this. Not yet. But the concern in Ngozi's message felt genuine, and it made Ifeoma's chest tighten. There were too many eyes on her. Too many people who knew too much. She pushed the phone back into her purse and kept walking. She couldn't let fear control her. Not now. When she reached the man in the suit's office, she took a deep breath before walking inside. The receptionist looked up at her with a polite smile, but Ifeoma didn't have time for pleasantries. "I need to speak with Mr. Okwara. Right now," she said, her voice firm. The receptionist hesitated, clearly unsure of how to handle such an abrupt request. But after a brief moment, she nodded and gestured for Ifeoma to follow her. They walked through a sleek, modern hallway, the walls adorned with abstract art and expensive-looking furniture. It felt cold, almost sterile, nothing like the warmth and familiarity of her own office. Everything about this place screamed power and control, and she couldn't help but feel small in comparison. When they reached his office, the receptionist knocked twice before opening the door. Mr. Okwara was sitting behind a massive desk, his eyes flicking up from a stack of papers as Ifeoma entered. He didn't look surprised to see her. In fact, he looked almost pleased. "Ifeoma, it's good to see you," he said, his voice calm and controlled. "I was wondering when you'd come. Please have a seat." Ifeoma didn't sit. She crossed her arms, glaring at him. "You've been watching me," she said, her voice cold, "and I want answers. What do you know about the people after my business? Who are they?" Mr. Okwara leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "I think you know more than you're letting on," he replied smoothly. "You've attracted attention, Ifeoma. Powerful people. People who don't take kindly to others stepping into their territory. I don't have time for games," she said, her voice sharp. "Tell me what's going on." He raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the tension. "You've already made your choice, Ifeoma. The only question now is whether you're ready to play the game to win." Ifeoma felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just a business deal. This was something far bigger, something that could destroy her if she wasn't careful. But she wasn't about to back down. "Not now. I'll do whatever it takes to protect what's mine," she said, her voice steady. Mr. Okwara smiled, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's the spirit. But remember, this game has no rules." The air in Mr. Okwara's office felt heavy, thick with unspoken threats and promises. Ifeoma stood there, her back straight and her eyes locked on him, refusing to show any hint of fear. She had spent too long hiding in the shadows, pretending to be small, pretending to be invisible. It was time to face the reality of what she had built and what she had become. Mr. Okwara's smile never wavered, but his eyes remained cold, calculating, as though he were measuring every word, every action she took. "You're brave, Ifeoma," he said after a long silence. "I'll give you that. Most people would have folded by now, but you're different. You remind me of myself when I was starting out." "I didn't come here for compliments," Ifeoma said sharply, her voice steady but her heart racing. "Tell me what you know. Who are these people after my business? What do they want?" He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms behind his head as though he were settling in for a comfortable conversation. "You know," he said slowly, "it's always fascinating how much people think they control, especially when they're on the outside looking in. But the reality is, Ifeoma, you've crossed into a world you don't fully understand. The business world, the one that matters, has its own rules, and those rules aren't always kind." Ifeoma clenched her fists at her sides, resisting the urge to lose her temper. "Stop talking in riddles, Mr. Okwara. Just tell me what's going on." He chuckled softly, seemingly amused by her frustration. "Very well," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "You've heard of the consortium, haven't you? The group of wealthy investors and power brokers who own nearly everything in this country." Ifeoma's stomach dropped. She had heard rumors, whispers about an elite group that pulled strings from the shadows, controlling industries, politics, everything. But she had never believed it was real. She thought it was just paranoia, the kind of conspiracy theory that only the desperate or the naive entertained. But now, hearing Mr. Okwara say it so casually, she realized that this group was very real, and they were watching her. "I know of them," she said carefully, trying to keep her voice neutral. But what does that have to do with my business? They've been watching you for some time, Ifeoma, he replied. Watching your rise, your empire. They're impressed, I'll give you that. But they don't like being ignored. They don't like someone building something from the ground up without their approval. You're an anomaly in their world. And that's dangerous. Ifeoma's mind raced. The consortium? She had built her business without their involvement, without their blessing. She had done it all on her own, and now it seemed like that very independence had made her a target. Are you saying they want to take my business? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. Mr. Okwara nodded slowly. Not just take it. They want to control it. You're in their way, Ifeoma. They want what you have, your assets, your resources, your power. And they're not going to let you keep it unless you play by their rules. Ifeoma felt a surge of anger. I've built everything on my own. I don't answer to anyone. And I won't be bullied into giving up what's mine. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. That's where you're wrong. You don't have a choice. They've already made their move. The question is whether you're going to fight back or let them walk all over you. Ifeoma's pulse quickened as the realization hit her. The people who had been watching her, the people who had been pulling the strings in the background, they weren't just after her business. They were after her, the person she had become. And they were willing to destroy everything she had built to get what they wanted. But she wasn't going to go down without a fight. She had worked too hard, fought too long, to let someone take it all away from her now. I'm not afraid of them, she said, her voice hard and resolute. I'll fight. I'll protect what's mine. Mr. Okwara studied her for a long moment before speaking again. I admire your resolve, Ifeoma, truly. But let me give you some advice. This isn't a battle you can win alone. You'll need allies, people who know how to navigate the world you've just stepped into. You'll need protection, because if you don't, you won't just lose your business. You'll lose everything. Ifeoma felt her throat tighten, her mind swirling with the weight of his words. He was right. She couldn't do this alone. The consortium was too powerful, too well-connected. She had underestimated them, but now it was too late. They had already marked her as a threat, and if she didn't fight back, she would be erased. I can help you, Ifeoma, Mr. Okwara continued, his voice smooth, almost persuasive. I have connections. I can introduce you to people who can protect you, who can make sure you don't lose everything you've worked for. Ifeoma hesitated. Trusting him was a dangerous game. She wasn't sure if she could believe anything he said, but the truth was, she had few options left. If she wanted to keep her empire intact, she would have to play along, at least for now. You want me to trust you? She asked, her voice skeptical. He nodded slowly. I'm offering you a lifeline, Ifeoma. Take it, or let them take everything from you. The choice is yours. For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. If she took his help, she would be stepping into a world she wasn't ready for. A world of manipulation, of power games. But if she didn't take it, she might lose everything. She might lose her business, her future, her freedom. I'll take your help, she said finally, her voice steady. But don't think for 1 second that I trust you. Mr. Okwara's smile returned, but this time, it seemed to carry a hint of respect. Fair enough, Ifeoma. Fair enough. But remember, you're not alone in this anymore. We'll work together, and together, we'll make sure you keep what's yours. Ifeoma didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mind was still reeling from the realization that everything was about to change. She had entered a world she had never intended to be a part of, and now she had to find a way to survive it. As she left his office, the weight of the decision settled heavily on her shoulders. She had made a choice, but the road ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and deception. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. But one thing was clear. She wasn't going down without a fight. She would protect her empire no matter the cost. The morning after her meeting with Mr. Okwara, Ifeoma found herself standing on the edge of a precipice. She had made the decision to accept his help, but as she sat in the sterile, cold office of his building, the weight of that decision was starting to feel like a chain around her neck. She had always prided herself on doing things on her own, building her empire from scratch with no one's help. But now, here she was, caught in a game far bigger than she had ever imagined, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever anticipated. The consortium was watching her, and they were playing a game with rules she didn't fully understand. Mr. Okwara's offer to help had sounded like a lifeline, but Ifeoma couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach. Was he genuinely trying to help her, or was he simply using her to advance his own agenda? She didn't know the answer, and that uncertainty gnawed at her. The office door opened, and Mr. Okwara stepped in, his presence as imposing as ever. He had a folder in his hand, and the look on his face was businesslike, but there was something in his eyes, something that told Ifeoma this was about to get even more complicated. "I thought you might want to see this," he said, placing the folder in front of her. Ifeoma picked it up, flipping it open. The first page was a map, one that looked oddly familiar. It detailed the location of a refinery she had once visited as part of her business expansion. But this map wasn't just about the refinery. It showed areas of interest all centered around her operations. As she scrolled through the documents, her heart sank. "They've been watching your every move, Ifeoma," Mr. Okwara said, his voice grave. "They know what you're planning, and they know what's vulnerable. They won't wait forever. You need to make your next move, and you need to do it fast." Ifeoma's head was spinning. The documents were a blueprint of her business's weaknesses, something she had spent years safeguarding against. Whoever these people were, they weren't just playing a game. They were in this to win, and winning meant taking everything from her. "What do they want?" Ifeoma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was no longer talking about Mr. Okwara. She was talking about the people pulling the strings in the background, the ones who had set their sights on her. "They want control, plain and simple," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "The consortium doesn't want to just buy you out. They want to break you, take what you've built, and make it their own. You're a threat to their control, Ifeoma. You've built something they can't ignore." Ifeoma felt a chill run down her spine. Everything she had built, her empire, her independence, was now a target. She was no longer just playing to grow a business. She was playing to survive. "I won't let them take it from me," she said, her voice low but resolute. "I've worked too hard to just hand it over." Mr. Okwara didn't flinch at her words. He had been in this world too long, and he knew how brutal the game could be. "You're not alone in this anymore, Ifeoma," he said. "That's why I'm here. But you need to be ready to fight. This is bigger than anything you've faced before." Her mind raced. There were too many unknowns, too many variables. If she fought back, she risked everything, her business, her safety, even her freedom. But if she did nothing, she would lose it all. She couldn't afford to be passive. She had to fight, and she had to do it on her terms. "I want to know everything," Ifeoma said, her voice now steady, but with an edge of determination. "I need to understand exactly what I'm up against." Mr. Okwara's lips curled into a slight smile, as though he were impressed by her resolve. "I thought you might say that." He slid another folder across the desk toward her, and this time it was thicker. As Ifeoma flipped it open, her eyes widened in shock. Inside were records, contracts, and names of key figures in the consortium, individuals she had heard of but never truly believed she would encounter. Powerful people, politicians, business tycoons, all of them were connected, and all of them had their hands in the pot she was now trying to protect. One name caught her attention: Uche Okoro, the head of a rival company that had long tried to take over smaller businesses in the oil sector. He had always been a shadowy figure in the industry, never one to step into the limelight, but his reputation was known: cutthroat, ruthless, and unyielding. "Uche Okoro," Ifeoma whispered. "I've heard rumors about him, but I never thought." "He's at the top of the food chain, Ifeoma," Mr. Okwara interjected, cutting off her thoughts. "The consortium answers to him. If you want to survive this, you'll need to go after him. He's the one pulling the strings." Ifeoma's head spun. The idea of confronting Uche Okoro, of going up against a man with that much power, was terrifying. But as she looked at the documents, something shifted inside her. Fear was natural, but so was the drive to protect everything she had worked for. She had built an empire, and now she was going to defend it. "Tell me what I need to do," she said, her voice steady now, a fire burning in her eyes. Mr. Okwara leaned back in his chair, studying her for a long moment. "The first step is to gain leverage. You have to get close to Okoro. Find out what he wants, what he needs. Then you use that against him. You play the game, Ifeoma. But you play it on your terms." Ifeoma nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. This wasn't the path she had planned, but it was the only path left to her. She had stepped into a war, and now she would fight with everything she had. "You've made the right choice," Mr. Okwara said, rising from his chair. "But remember this, Ifeoma. In this game, there are no allies. Everyone's a potential enemy." Ifeoma stood as well, her mind made up. "I understand." As she walked out of the office, the weight of the decision she had made settled heavily on her shoulders. She had chosen her path, and there was no turning back. The game had begun, and now she had to play to win. The following days felt like a blur for Ifeoma. The weight of the decision she had made was heavier than she had expected, but there was no turning back now. She was fully entrenched in a game of power, a game where the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. And the one thing she knew for certain was that if she didn't act quickly, she could lose everything. Her phone buzzed again, breaking her from her thoughts. Another message from Mr. Okwara. It read simply, "Meet me tomorrow. I have news." Ifeoma stared at the message for a moment, her fingers hovering over the screen. She didn't trust Mr. Okwara completely, but there was no denying the fact that he was the only ally she had right now. And whether she liked it or not, she was going to need him to help navigate the dangerous world she had entered. The next morning, she arrived at his office with a mix of anticipation and dread. The tall, imposing building loomed over her as she entered, and the receptionist greeted her with the same polite smile as before. This time, however, Ifeoma didn't feel like a guest. She felt like a player, one who was about to make her move. Mr. Okwara was waiting for her in his office when she arrived. His usual calm demeanor had a hint of urgency about it today, and he didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I have something important to show you," he said, sliding a new folder across the desk. It was thicker than the last one, and Ifeoma's heart skipped a beat. "What's this?" she asked, her voice steady, but the tension in her chest was palpable. "Inside is the key to gaining leverage over Okoro. But be warned, this is risky." Mr. Okwara paused, his eyes locking with hers. "If you move forward with this, you won't just be playing the game. You'll be changing the rules." Ifeoma opened the folder, her eyes scanning the documents inside. There were reports, financials, connections, names, but then her gaze landed on a photograph that made her freeze. It was a picture of Uche Okoro, standing beside a man she recognized immediately. It was Chidi. Her breath caught in her throat. Chidi? How was he connected to Uche Okoro? And why hadn't he told her about this? She stared at the photograph, trying to make sense of it. Okoro's hand was resting on Chidi's shoulder in a way that made Ifeoma's skin crawl. There was no doubt in her mind now. This wasn't just a coincidence. Chidi had known exactly what he was getting into when he left her. He had known about the consortium, about the people behind it, and he had chosen to play for the other side. "I didn't think you knew about this," Mr. Okwara said, watching Ifeoma closely. "But now you do. Chidi has been working with Okoro for months. He's not the man you thought he was. And this," he gestured to the photo, "this is your key. If you want to bring down Okoro, you have to expose this connection. It's your leverage." Ifeoma's world felt like it was crashing down. Everything she had believed about Chidi, about their life together, was a lie. He hadn't just left her. He had chosen a side in a battle she never even knew existed. He had been working with Okoro, the very person who was trying to destroy everything she had worked for. She couldn't wrap her mind around it. The betrayal was too much, too deep. Chidi, the man she had loved, the man she had stood by, he had been working with the very people who were now threatening her business, her livelihood, her future. "I can't believe it," Ifeoma whispered, her voice breaking. "How could he do this to me?" Mr. Okwara didn't offer comfort. Instead, he spoke with the same cold efficiency that had marked their previous conversations. You need to focus, Ifeoma. This is your way in. If you confront Okoro with this information, you'll have the upper hand. You can leverage Chidi's connection to him, expose it, and make Okoro think twice about taking your business. But it has to be done carefully. If Okoro realizes, he'll strike first. Ifeoma's mind was racing, the adrenaline already flooding her system. She was no longer just protecting her business. She was protecting herself, her dignity, her future. Chidi had turned his back on her, and now she had to turn the tables. She wasn't going to let anyone, especially not him, take away everything she had built. But even as the resolve began to settle in, another question gnawed at her. What did this mean for her and Chidi? Could she confront him? Could she look him in the eye after everything she had learned? Do I really want to do this? She asked herself aloud, her fingers tracing the photograph in front of her. You don't have a choice, Mr. Okwara said firmly. You've been pushed into a corner, and now you're going to push back. You don't get to make these decisions based on emotions. You need to think strategically. Ifeoma nodded slowly, her mind slowly processing the new reality she found herself in. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady. I'll use Chidi's connection to Okoro. I'll expose them both. Mr. Okwara smiled slightly, his eyes calculating. Good. I knew you had it in you. But remember, Ifeoma, there's no going back from this. Once you make your move, the game will escalate. You'll have to play with the big players, and they won't hesitate to take you down if you're not careful. I'm ready, Ifeoma said, her voice hard. I've been playing small for too long. It's time to step up. With that, she stood up, the resolve in her eyes stronger than ever. She wasn't just fighting for her business anymore. She was fighting for herself, for the woman she had become. The woman who would no longer let anyone, least of all Chidi, control her fate. As she left the office, the weight of what she was about to do settled on her shoulders, but it no longer felt like a burden. Felt like power. She was no longer just a player in the game. She was taking control of it. The game had changed. Ifeoma felt the weight of her decision as soon as she left Mr. Okwara's office. The photograph of Chidi and Uche Okoro was burned into her mind, an image that had shattered her sense of trust and left a cold, bitter taste in her mouth. She had loved Chidi. She had trusted him. And now, the man who had walked out on her had been working for the very people who were threatening to destroy everything she had worked for. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She stared at the screen, her breath catching. It was a text from Chidi. Can we talk? The text was simple, but it felt like a bombshell. She hadn't heard from him in months, not since the day he left. And now, after everything, he wanted to talk? Ifeoma's mind raced. What did he want? Did he know she had found out about his connection to Okoro? Had he been planning to come back and explain himself? Or was this just another move in a game she had never been meant to understand? She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to delete the message and move on. But another part, the part that still couldn't quite shake the feeling she had for him, wanted to hear what he had to say. She had to know if he was going to come clean. After a moment, she typed a single word in response. Where? A few seconds later, a reply came through. I'll meet you at the old cafe, the one we used to go to. Please, Ifeoma. I just want to talk. The old cafe. It was the place where they had spent countless afternoons together, laughing over coffee, planning their future. It was the last place she had expected to meet him, not after everything that had happened. But there was no denying the pull, the lingering feelings that still connected her to him, no matter how much she tried to deny it. She pushed those feelings aside, standing tall as she made her way to the cafe. She was no longer the woman who had fallen for his empty promises. She was a woman with power, a woman who had fought to build an empire, and no matter what Chidi said, she wasn't going to let him or anyone else take it from her. When she arrived, the cafe was nearly empty. It was a small, quiet place tucked away in the corner of the city, a place that held too many memories of happier times. The sight of it made her chest tighten, but she refused to let the nostalgia overwhelm her. She was here for answers. Chidi was already sitting at a table in the back, his posture tense, as though he had been waiting for this moment to arrive for a long time. His eyes locked onto hers the moment she entered, and for a fleeting second, she saw something in them, something that made her heart ache. But she pushed the feeling away. This was business now, not romance. She walked over and sat down across from him, her back straight, her expression unreadable. "Chidi," she said, her voice steady. "You wanted to talk. So talk." He looked at her, his face strained. He hadn't changed much since the last time they had seen each other. Still handsome, still carrying that air of confidence. But there was something else in his eyes now. Guilt, regret, maybe even fear. "I know you're angry," he started, his voice soft. "And I deserve that. I messed up, Ifeoma. I spent months regretting the way I left you. But I—" "Stop," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to come back and play the victim. You left me. You abandoned me. And now you want to talk like it was all a misunderstanding." He flinched, and for a moment, she saw the man she had once loved. The man who had been her partner, her confidant. But then she remembered the photograph, the connection to Uche Okoro. And everything inside her hardened. "I know you've been working with Okoro," she said, her voice cold as ice. "I know about the consortium. I know everything, Chidi. So don't come here and act like this is just about us. You've been playing both sides, and I won't let you lie to me again." Chidi's face paled, and he looked down at his hands, as though trying to find the right words. When he finally spoke, his voice was shaky. "I never meant for it to happen like this, Ifeoma," he said, his words hurried. "I didn't want you to know. I didn't want to drag you into this world. But after everything we went through, after all the struggles, I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd realize that what I was doing was for us. For our future." "For our future?" Ifeoma echoed, her voice rising with disbelief. "You think this is about our future? You think working with the very people who are trying to destroy my business is going to lead to a future for us? You're not the man I thought you were, Chidi. You're a coward, hiding behind a facade of ambition, using me to get ahead." "I didn't use you," he pleaded, his hands reaching across the table toward her. "I did it because I thought it was the only way for us to get ahead. I thought I was doing what was best for us. For you." For a moment, Ifeoma's chest tightened. She had loved him so deeply, had trusted him so completely, and now, looking at him across the table, it was hard to reconcile the man who had once been her partner with the man sitting in front of her now. But the truth was clear. She had no room for weakness, no room for sentimentality. Not anymore. "You made your choice, Chidi," she said quietly. "And now I'm making mine." She stood up, not giving him the chance to speak again. As she walked out of the cafe, her heart felt heavy, but resolute. Chidi had chosen his side. He had chosen to betray her. And now she was going to take control of the game. No more lies, no more manipulation. The battle was just beginning. The wind howled through the city streets as Ifeoma walked away from the cafe. She felt as though she had just cut a tether that had held her to the past. A painful severing that left her with nothing but the cold reality of what she had to do next. Chidi was no longer a part of her future. She couldn't afford to let him be. But even as she walked, her thoughts kept returning to him. The guilt in his eyes, the pleading in his voice. Had she been too harsh? Could she have given him a chance to explain himself? She shook her head, forcing those thoughts aside. She couldn't afford to waver now. There was too much at stake. Her phone buzzed again, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. It was Mr. Okoro. She hesitated for a moment before answering, knowing that this call would bring her closer to the inevitable confrontation with Uche Okoro. "I hope this is good news," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "You won't like this, but it's time to move," Mr. Okoro said, his voice low, urgent. "Okoro is planning something. I don't know what exactly, but he's making moves. You need to act fast." "Do we have a plan?" Ifeoma asked, already feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. She was standing at the edge of a precipice, and one wrong move could send her tumbling into a world she couldn't control. "Yes," he replied. "I've set up a meeting with one of Okoro's key partners. He's not entirely loyal to Okoro, but he's got information that could give you the upper hand. You need to get to him before Okoro realizes what's going on." "If he's a key partner, why would he be willing to talk to me?" Ifeoma asked, her skepticism evident in her tone. "Because he's afraid," Mr. Okwara replied. "Afraid of losing everything. He knows Okoro's dangerous, and he's looking for an escape. But he won't go public unless you can offer him something. Something bigger than Okoro's promises." "I'll be ready," Ifeoma said, her mind already turning over the possibilities. "Tell me where and when." "Tonight, 8 p.m., at the warehouse on East Bay Street. He's expecting you." The call ended abruptly, and Ifeoma stood there for a moment, taking in what had just transpired. A meeting with one of Okoro's own people, this was it. This was her chance to finally break through the web of deception, to find the leverage she needed to protect what was hers. She glanced around at the busy city streets, but everything felt distant, as though she were walking in a dream. The world around her had grown smaller, quieter, and more dangerous. Every step she took, every decision she made was a risk. But the alternative, letting Okoro and the consortium destroy everything she had worked for, was worse. As night fell, Ifeoma made her way to the warehouse on East Bay Street, her mind focused, her body tense. The shadows seemed to deepen around her, and she felt the weight of every step pressing down on her. This wasn't just another meeting. This was the turning point, the moment when everything she had been building, her business, her independence, her life, could be taken from her, or it could be solidified. The warehouse loomed in the distance, a dark and imposing structure that seemed to swallow the light around it. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. As she approached the entrance, the door swung open, revealing a tall man standing inside. He was dressed in a dark suit, his face obscured by the shadows, but there was no mistaking the cold, calculating look in his eyes. "You must be Ifeoma," he said, his voice flat and businesslike. "I am," she replied, her voice steady. "And you must be the man who's willing to talk." He stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. "I don't have much time," he said as he led her inside. "Okoro's not one to be kept waiting, and neither am I. But if you're here, it means you've got a plan. So let's get to it." Ifeoma took a deep breath, her nerves tightening as she followed him deeper into the warehouse. The walls were bare, the air thick with the scent of oil and metal. The atmosphere was sterile, cold, much like the world she was now a part of. It felt like everything here was a transaction, every action calculated, every word a potential weapon. When they reached a small table in the center of the room, the man motioned for her to sit. "Let's make this quick," he said. "I don't trust Okoro, but I don't trust anyone in this business. So, tell me what you want, and I'll tell you what I know." Ifeoma sat down, her mind sharpening, the plan she had been formulating in her mind coming into focus. "I want Okoro's weaknesses," she said, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "I want to know how to take him down." The man studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he nodded. "Okoro's been making moves. Too many of them. He's setting up a deal with a foreign investor. If he pulls it off, it'll solidify his control over the entire region. But there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" Ifeoma pressed. "The investor's starting to question Okoro's methods," he said, his voice lowering. "There are rumors, things that could hurt Okoro's reputation. If you could leverage that, if you could make it public, it would destroy him." Ifeoma's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. The information she had been waiting for. This was her chance to turn the tables. "I can do that," she said, her voice steady, her resolve hardening. "But I need more than just rumors. I need proof." The man leaned forward, his gaze intense. "You won't get it from me," he said bluntly. "I can't risk it, but I can get you in touch with someone who can. They'll have what you need." But if you go down that road, you'll be in deep. There's no coming back from it. Ifeoma nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. I'll take my chances. The man studied her for a long moment before nodding. All right, I'll make the call. But remember this, Okoro won't go down without a fight. You'll need to be ready for whatever he throws your way. As she stood up to leave, Ifeoma's mind was racing. She had the leverage she needed, but she had also stepped into a world that was far more dangerous than she had anticipated. The risks were higher than ever, but there was no other choice. She had to win no matter the cost. As she stepped out of the warehouse and into the night, she felt a coldness settle over her. This was it. The fight for everything she had worked for was about to begin in earnest. The air was thick with anticipation as Ifeoma stood in front of the building where everything she had worked for was about to be put to the test. The plan had been set in motion, and now she had to see it through. The information she had gathered, the allies she had made, and the risks she had taken had all led to this moment. She checked her phone again. The message from the man in the warehouse had come through. The proof you need is in place. Be ready. Her pulse quickened as she looked up at the towering skyscraper ahead of her. It was the heart of Uche Okoro's empire, a symbol of the power he had amassed over the years. But today it felt like a house of cards, ready to fall with a single push. The plan was simple, but its execution would require precision, timing, and the right leverage. She had the proof, the financial records that tied Okoro to a series of illegal transactions, the same records that could expose his dealings with corrupt government officials and shady foreign investors. But this wasn't just about taking down Okoro. It was about sending a message. To him, to the consortium, to anyone who thought they could come for what she had built. She wasn't just fighting for her business anymore. She was fighting for her life, for her future. Ifeoma's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden vibration of her phone. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat. It was Chidi. I need to talk to you. Please. She stared at the message for a long moment, the memories flooding back. He had left her. He had betrayed her. And yet, there was a part of her that still wanted to hear what he had to say. Her grip tightened around the phone, her mind torn between the two worlds she had been living in. The world of power and revenge, and the world of love and betrayal. She couldn't afford distractions now, not with everything on the line. Ignoring the message, Ifeoma pushed forward. She had made her decision. She was no longer the woman who let her emotions control her. She was the woman who controlled her own destiny. When she entered the building, the security was tight, as expected. But she was ready. The guard at the front desk barely looked up as she flashed a visitor badge, courtesy of the contacts she had cultivated. She had done her homework. She knew every exit, every security blind spot. As she walked through the sterile hallways, her heart pounded in her chest, but her steps were steady. She couldn't afford hesitation. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to waste it. She reached the elevator that would take her to the top floor, where Okoro's office awaited. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, pressing the button for the penthouse suite. The ride up felt slow, as if the elevator was moving through time itself. When the doors opened, she was greeted by a breathtaking view of the city. The lights glittered below like stars, but the sight left her cold. This wasn't the city she had built. This wasn't her empire. It was his, a world built on greed and manipulation, and she had come to take it down. Okoro's assistant was at her desk, but when Ifeoma approached, the woman's eyes widened in recognition. She didn't say a word. She just nodded toward the door leading to Okoro's office. Ifeoma pushed it open without a second thought. Inside, Uche Okoro was standing by the window, his back to her, looking out over the city. He turned when he heard the door close behind her, his cold eyes assessing her with that same calculating gaze she had seen in every picture, every document. But now, there was something different in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, of realization that the game had just shifted. I thought you'd come, Okoro said, his voice smooth, confident. I didn't think it would take this long, though. I'm here to end this, Ifeoma replied, her voice steady, her hands clenched at her sides. I'm not here for a conversation, Okoro. I'm here to expose you, and I'm here to take everything you've built. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that said he knew something she didn't. You think you've won, don't you? He asked, taking a step closer. You think you've got the upper hand, but you're playing with fire, Ifeoma. You think this is about business? You think this is just about a few shady deals? You're wrong. This is about power, control, and survival. You think you can beat me at my own game? If I wanted power and control, I would have played by your rules, Ifeoma said, her eyes never leaving his. But I'm not like you, and I'm not going to let you take what's mine. You've already taken enough. Okoro's smile faded slightly, and for a moment, Ifeoma saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. He hadn't expected her to come this far. He hadn't expected her to have the strength, the resolve, to take him on. I know about your deal with the foreign investor, Ifeoma continued, pulling the documents from her bag and slamming them on his desk. I know about the illegal transactions, the kickbacks, the bribes, and I have enough evidence to bring you down. Okoro looked at the papers, then back at her, his face hardening. You really think anyone will believe you? He asked, his voice dripping with disdain. You think you've got the power to take me down? You're nothing but a small-time player. This. He waved his hand dismissively at the papers. This won't matter. The world will forget about you the moment I decide it's over. Ifeoma didn't flinch. I'm not here to change the world. I'm here to make sure you never get to ruin another life again. Not mine. Not anyone else's. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, Okoro stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. You've made a mistake, Ifeoma. You've crossed a line, and now you're going to pay the price. He reached for his phone, and just as his hand brushed the screen, Ifeoma moved with lightning speed. She grabbed the papers and held them out in front of him, her hand shaking with adrenaline, but her voice unwavering. Not this time, Okoro. This time, you're the one who's going down. He stopped, his hand hovering just above the phone. And in that moment, Ifeoma realized something. She wasn't just fighting for her business anymore. She was fighting for her place in this world. For her right to exist in a space where she wasn't controlled, where she wasn't silenced. The game was over, and Ifeoma was the one who had won. Ifeoma's empire stood strong. She had exposed Uche Okoro for the corrupt businessman he truly was, and the evidence she had gathered brought him to his knees. With Okoro out of the picture, the consortium's grip on her life was loosened, and she could finally breathe again. But the journey had changed her. It had shaped her into someone more powerful, more resolute. She wasn't the woman who had once stood by quietly while her world crumbled. She was now the woman who built her future from the ground up, who fought for what was hers and took it without hesitation. The world was hers for the taking, and nothing, no one, could ever take it from her again. What do you think of Ifeoma's journey? Was it worth the risks she took to take down Okoro and protect her empire? Like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Where are you watching from? How did you feel about the ending? Let us know in the comments below.